All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. We're really excited about this panel. This could be one of the most important topics when it comes to crypto because we know that you need wealth in order to earn yields, but why not create that original wealth with data? Monetize your data. Your crypto's making yields, so why not your data? So this is a very, very important topic that we have here today. And look at the guests that we have on this panel. First off, let me introduce you guys to Bruce Pond, the founder of Ocean Protocol, a blockchain startup focused on bringing data and AI together since 2013. And then we have, of course, Sam Elliman, CEO of Kylan Network. Sam is a coder at heart and has built distributed systems at some of the world's largest companies, such as Sony, PlayStation, and Discovery Communications. And of course, last but not least, we have Dylan Dudney, CSO of Kylan Network, CEO of NFT3. Dylan is a longtime crypto and blockchain enthusiast since 2011 and currently the CSO at Kylan Network. What a panel that we have today. And we are super excited. Also, a shout out to Tyler as well, who we have in this lovely panel. Guys, first off, I'd love to ask you the simple question that everyone is wondering out there. Why? What is your very best argument when it comes to getting people interested in monetizing their data? Bruce, if we can kick off with you, buddy, let's go for it.
So we've been working on data since 2013. We were one of the very first NFT providers. We've been involved with DAOs and stuff like that. And I think that data is one of the next big things that are happening. And it's not necessarily the D data. Most people don't care about the decentralized aspect. They care about the financial aspect. How can I make money off something where currently I can't? And I think that's what's going to be exciting because there's trillions at stake here for everybody, companies as well as governments.
Trillions at stake here, beautifully said. Tyler, if you want to join the conversation and add on, what is your best argument to get people interested in this monetizing your data idea?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So kind of what Bruce said, the common theme in Web3 in general is kind of how can we figure out ways to, kind of subvert industries. And, one huge part of that, it's kind of a later stage thing is data. Like Bruce was mentioning, Ocean's been working on it for a while. I do think that, data privacy is becoming more and more in the public awareness. And, and on top of that, people are realizing that data is probably our most valuable asset, in this day and age. And so, when you take that and you can create ways essentially to monetize it, essentially, I think that's a very powerful concept, which is we're all excited to be building, I think, in this call.
I think you may be muted, Alex, maybe.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sam, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, go for it, buddy. Go for it.
Hey, so both Brian and Tyler made really good points. But to me, really, the underlying value of why is data important? It's because when you look at the explosion of companies, social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, they're valued so high because they understand their customer behavior. And when a product is free, the person using it is the product, right? So for the explosion of data in my mind, in my vision, is the inverse of that, where people realize what their value is worth, what my data is worth, and now I need to monetize it in such a way where let me try and make as much value as one at my behavior, understanding other people's behavior. Let me try and market it up and sell it off. So to me, it's now people are coming to awareness. It was organizations, but now it's individuals trying to understand what their value is.
I think he got cut off here.
Oh,
can you hear us?
Hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. And so, Dylan, do you want to add anything to this before we move to the next part?
I think like a really simple analogy that may be resonant is that You know, like in 2017, 2018, we, you know, many of us held Bitcoin and Ethereum just sort of like idle in our wallets. And it wasn't really doing much until DeFi came along, and this sort of like composite ecosystem of things that allowed the flowering of like DeFi and us being able to echo traditional financial instruments in decentralized manner. So I think that like you can kind of look at all of this idle data in sort of in a similar way, right? Where we can start to approach understanding the operationalization and monetization of data through sort of more decentralized rails, and the value transfer layer. I think has been set down from the financial use case already. So I think that you know, this is sort of like a ripe time to discuss this. That's my only input.
Thanks so much. So clearly, this is a phenomenon, as you guys are saying, that is very new to many, right? Like we're not really used to having this ownership. We're not really used to knowing what to do with it, right? So maybe the next question would be for all the viewers out there is simply like, how do I monetize my data? Where do I start, you know, for people to really understand how valuable this truly is? Because of course, through the BlockDown Twitter, we see, you know, data is the new gold. Data is the new oil. It's the most valuable commodity in the world. But really, isn't it hard to understand how to monetize it? Who would like to kick off and give us some examples of what I can do with my data as of today?
I can go. That's fine.
Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, so that's exactly the underlining value that we're trying to do at Kylin, right? We're trying to develop this data marketplace to define what exactly the demand is. So we're trying to build this data marketplace where people can come in and define their data set. Look, I want, for example, if I'm an insurance provider, this is an example we always use, and I'm doing insurance for flights, but I don't have the data expertise to build out the data sets that are required to tell me, you know, not only when flights are late, but what the weather was like and what was trending on that particular time, or if there is any particular black swan events, or for example, the volcano in Iceland that was what, 5-10 years ago, I can remember. The point is, I want someone from the community to build out this data set for me in a trustless manner. Once you identify that as someone in the community, that's what people need, I can go off and build it. That's why having that marketplace, having that platform where you can build in whatever you want, whatever you want built, you can ask the community to build it. And then that's where the community is saying, well, hang on, I have some coding experience. I can start looking at joining these data sets together and providing that. But, you know, that's just one example. What if it's like, oh, we're building a marketplace for shoes or clothes or any form thing, and I work at a clothing company and I know a lot about that business domain, you can start utilizing that knowledge and monetizing it.
Super cool. So essentially, companies are looking for specific data sets. They go through a company like Kylin and they're like, okay, this is the data we're looking for. And then people realize, wait, I can contribute to that data.
Exactly.
I want to put my input in there and my information so I can earn money out of it, just providing that type of information.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
That's very cool. Tyler, what are your thoughts on this? Do you have any other examples that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so totally agree with Sam's point, and you know, there's some folks in this room, Bruce and then Down as well, that are kind of all towards, you know, this data kind of vision. The one thing that we're focusing on at Ruby is essentially, you know, we're strong believers that the first step in all of this, you know, data monetization is privacy, right? You know, data ownership. You know, this is something that people need to get used to in our minds. So, you know, essentially, you know, Web3 is kind of just right at the beginning, and you know, I know we keep saying, you know, we're early. That's actually true, right? It's not very well adopted thus far, but you know, building out the railways, or I guess the infrastructure essentially to allow for, you know, a privacy first approach, you know, and that stretches across, you know, social media that will be on Web3, you know, obviously DeFi, GameFi, Metaverse, NFTs. There's so many different, you know, applications right now being built out and ecosystems being built out. And, you know, it all comes back to, you know, enabling, you know, true data ownership on, you know, a decentralized storage layer like Filecoin, Arweave, et cetera. And, you know, once you have that data, you know, privately, securely encrypted, you know, then you can kind of go to an open data marketplace like Ocean, Kyle, et cetera, and be able to actually monetize these things that, you know, we've all been living in a Web2 world for, what, 15, 20 years actually now, right? And actually being able to, so really, in my opinion, it's going to take some time to get there and to really push that narrative out into the open that yes, this is now possible. But once we get there, I'm excited to see kind of the possibilities, right? So we're really only at the beginning, in my opinion.
Thanks so much for sharing that. That makes sense to transition to you, Bruce, and Ocean Protocol. You guys have some really cool data mechanisms and sets. Like, what are some of the current examples that you like that's happening with Ocean Protocol and these type of data monetization opportunities?
So one of the tools that we've built in there is essentially pricing of data. That is the one signal that is missing for people to understand the true value of their data. And it's one of those unknowns, because if you're trying to have algorithmic trading based off data, you're willing to pay a lot because you can earn a lot. Whereas if you're an NGO and you're collecting data for perhaps public good, you might not have as much resources. So signals on pricing are going to be very important for incentives to get people into the ecosystem, to start cleaning data, processing data, and getting the data into a structure that people can use. And then obviously, what Sam said in terms of Kylan, getting prizes out there, getting competitions so that people actually start looking at that data in new ways to solve new problems. That is also a fundamental kind of building block that we need to have. And then you have all the stuff around it: trust, privacy, the decentralized rails, the ownership of the data. All of that stuff, I think, comes out of the box with decentralized tech.
That's a really cool angle, Bruce, because it makes me realize, oh, what if I don't have cool data? I can still help clean, I can still help verify, I can still contribute in some way to the ecosystem and find other value than just sharing my own data. Is that what you're saying here, Bruce?
Yeah, totally. You need data providers, and then you need the processing, whether it's curation, cleaning, getting into the right structure, adding to it, augmenting it, labeling. There's so many aspects of a new data economy that anybody on Earth can now play a part in. And because it's on decentralized rails, the on-ramp is now virtually zero. Unlike today's world, where you had to be somewhere where data was being processed, Austin or Washington or San Francisco, you don't have to do that anymore. You can be anywhere. And so I believe very strongly that this opens up economic opportunity for anybody with an internet connection.
I think that's a key point here, Bruce. It's opening up to anybody. You do not need the initial wealth to invest. You can actually make that initial wealth, which is an absolute amazing thing when we talk about inclusion, financial inclusion, and connecting the world. Dylan, I saw you nodding to many of the remarks coming from Bruce. Anything you want to add to that?
Oh, well, first off, I have like this extreme admiration for Bruce. I don't know if he knows that, but I feel like he's a time traveler from the future, or because he was thinking about a lot of this stuff like all the way back from, I think, 2013, 2014. You guys started thinking about the implications of all of this. So I think it's worth like just sort of like saying that, that I think that he's a pioneer, OG in the space, and just much respect. But I also just want to like talk about, I guess, just a point of, the business model of the internet is extremely limited, and the data markets that have been created out of that are also extremely limited. So we're looking at a very narrow like set of dynamic like interactions that are based on the productization of a person and the polishing of their information to sell things back to them. Which Sam alluded to is this sort of like Faustian bargain that we've made in this sort of pre-Web3 era of getting cool software and maybe some dopamine hits, for selling ourselves, selling our souls, selling our equity, our existence, right? So I think that when this is my thesis, when and by the way, the total addressable market of like data is just beyond, I think, beyond reckoning, right? Because in addition to the decentralization of this stuff, like Bruce is alluding to, there's going to be new market efficiencies. And it's unfortunate that Dawn from Oasis Protocol wasn't able to be, in the conference today, but I think she'd talk about that quite a bit too. I think that's really exciting to consider how how sharing of information will create new business market opportunities. And data itself is an evergreen sort of resource. It's actually oil is a shaky analogy for data, because data keeps going, like and we keep creating data.
Yeah.
The limited resource when it comes to data is the human being that is involved in creating the data. And so I think that just as an affirmation of all the points made so far, I think we're going to be entering an era. I really hope, as long we have to be really careful about this, because Facebook and Meta, that their communities don't give a crap about decentralization. They may not even know about it. So we actually have like this political orientation and a rapid path to get adoption. Like, we need to move fast. So I'm extremely pleased that there are many projects working on this. But I think when the first stories start to come out of people making some really interesting, significant personal capitalizations on sharing data, and not just people, but maybe this involves enterprise too, then we're going to have some really cool stuff coming out. I think the biggest leading edge is probably feeding ML, right? Like ML is sort of bottlenecked right now, and that's why we don't have that like Jarvis and Iron Man and stuff like that we were expecting maybe a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm being a little like Pollyannic maybe, but I think that it's really exciting, and I just want to affirm everyone's points and make sure everyone recognizes that Bruce is an OG in the space, and that's it. That's on my end.
I'm feeling the bromance here, guys. For those watching out there, show us some love in the group chat as well. Send us some hearts, whatever you want. See, we're all one family. It's a beautiful message. Thank you so much for sharing that. One thing that I would like to ask you guys, it's kind of taking a step back, and I apologize for that, but we're talking about how to monetize the data. And Jessica had a really good question, which was, how can we ensure that we're proactive with ownership in terms of our own data? Would anyone like to, because we're talking about already monetization, but like, I don't even know how to focus on the ownership side of things. What are some tips that you guys have to be proactive in that sense?
I'll just jump in super quick, because I know I talked a little bit just then. And I would say, like, I think that when people realize the value of the data, and this is what I think Bruce is working on, and we're working on really well, to try to understand the price of data. I think when people understand the value of the data, be much more protective over what their data journey is, right, in the future. That's what I think the kind of general answer is to that. And when those stories start coming out of like a friend making like $500 from uploading their genome and a researcher accessing it in, hey, like Tyler, in a trustless computing way for Ruby, like this is a good plug for you, then like maybe they'll say, hey dude, hey friend, like don't upload your stuff to 23andMe because they're just selling it on the back end. Maybe you should go through this like other application or platform, because then you actually will make some money.
That makes a lot of sense, and a good transition for you, Tyler, at Ruby Protocol. Well, what do you try to instill in terms of habits, of actions to start taking ownership of your employees' data, or just getting that message across?
Yeah, so thanks for the shout out there, Dylan. I think that, from our personal standpoint, I guess at Ruby Labs, it's very apparent that, things are becoming more and more clear that, Web 2 model is broken, Cambridge Analytica, you can go on and on and on, right? But from kind of an individual responsibility standpoint, as individuals, right? I think that, now is the time, and it should have maybe been a little bit earlier, but, now is the time, to kind of really educate ourselves about really what is happening with our data, like how it's being captured, like how it's being used, and so on and so forth. So like trust right now is becoming, well, has been a huge thing for a while now, from just a company social responsibility standpoint. And I think that the way that in my mind anyways this can be adopted is amazing protocols like Ocean and Kyle, and different things that are being created, like NFT3, shout out to Dylan, right, in terms of an actual social identity on chain, right, like a digital decentralized identity, on chain. And the last kind of piece there is privacy, right? And privacy in our mind, it doesn't really mean anonymity. I know that Web3 and crypto kind of came to be as this kind of a direct result, and anonymity has become a direct result, of kind of just kind of the way blockchain was created in general. But with privacy, And that's not to say you're doing anything shady, for instance. It's just, you know, you're protecting your data. You're getting more in line with ownership. You know, there's this huge push in Web3 about the ownership economy, and it stretches across the board, right? But, you know, if you can actually, you know, just ask yourself the question, if you can own your data, you know, what then can you do with it, right? So, you know, just harking back to Dylan's point, excuse me, a few topics ago, he was kind of just saying that, you know, that people are now just starting to realize this. And, you know, there are things that, you know, everyone in this room, everyone probably listening hasn't even thought of yet. So that concept is really exciting for me. And it all just kind of starts or harkens back at the beginning to, you know, building up the infrastructure to allow these things to be created, right? So.
Thanks so much, Tyler. And Sam and obviously Bruce, any actionable items that you guys like to put in place for people who want to start owning their data and not make too many mistakes and giving it for free and other people selling it behind their backs?
I'll let Sam take this first.
I was literally about to say the same thing. I think if you take a step back and look at the question, how can you be proactive, right? How can you be proactive about your data, and you compare it to how can you be proactive about your security? Before we all got into Bitcoin, you know, before we all jumped into this rabbit hole, most people, like virtually everyone I have spoken to, had really, really bad security practices, right? They would use the same password on their websites. They had no clue what multi-factor authentication was. They would just be like, it's okay, I'll let Facebook or Twitter handle my data or handle my information. I'll put my trust in these centralized places. But once they owned some crypto, once they attributed some value to whatever cryptocurrency they were holding, and they realized, hang on, this is actually worth a lot of money. I have to now understand, I have to use unique passwords, I have to use multi-factor, I have to really secure this because they've attributed value to this thing. Now, that paradigm works exactly the same for data. Once you realize that you are in charge, or you have some value, some data that is valuable, you will become far more proactive about it. You will find out ways of monetizing that information. It's up to you to understand what data do you have that has value. And you might you might have something that, oh, hang on, I knew that, I could have done that. That's fine, you missed that opportunity. But now you're open to it. Now your eyes are open to it. You realize what it could be worth, and your mind will start working about what other data sets, what other data points, what other information do I have that's valuable to people, and how can I monetize it? That to me is how you become proactive.
Very nicely put, Sam.
Yeah, and I'm super interested to hear what Bruce thinks about like Facebook and Meta. Sorry to jump on like the interviewer train, but I'm just super interested to hear what you think about like if this is a capitulation, right, of Web 2, or in some way, shape, or form. Sorry to jump on that.
Go for it, buddy.
So I'll answer the main question. We are the vanguard. It's our responsibility to build the tools to give everybody an Apple experience. We're not there yet. We're at, let's say, 1998 dial-up internet connection kind of mode. We need to make this technology easy, intuitive, fun, and financially rewarding for everybody. And just off the rails of Web3, where data is, or ownership is pushed to the actual owner, whether it's data, it's NFTs, it's your Bitcoin, or any other asset that you might have. I think that pressure to make it a bottoms-up experience is on all of us, because let's be honest, nobody cares about the decentralized aspect except us, because we are the vanguard. But with these values in place, we can build those rails so that just normal people on the street will be able to eventually sell their data and monetize it and do what they really want to do without worrying about all the back end stuff, because I don't really think it works from top down. It has to work from bottom up, and I think that's why we're all here. And with Facebook and Meta, I think the A16Z had a very good take on this. The metaverse is a new platform for building all the apps that we use today in Web 2 in a new platform. where it's interactive. There's virtual reality, there's augmented reality, and all that sort of stuff. And so the metaverse is definitely something that very, very few people understand, but it will be, it will need to be built on decentralized rails, and it will be a fundamental kind of shift in where we build our new applications that will be just way more interactive and way more rich, 5K experience, whatever you call it. You know, it's just going to be fantastic in this way. And I think that Facebook trying to pivot onto this, it's a good sign, but it's also obviously a bad sign. It means that we now have competition in the world that we're building, and maybe we can drag Facebook along, but I'm not optimistic.
Now, if I can stick with you, Bruce, for the last question, I think you opened up a great transition on how we can wrap up this panel. So guys, we talked about why this is so critical, why we need to start taking ownership and responsibility of our data, how to value it, how to start making money and monetizing the data. So perhaps, Bruce, if we can stick with you, and if you could tell us, like, what is the most exciting development for monetizing data that is coming maybe in 1 month, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years, doesn't really matter. I know you touched upon the metaverse, but what is that final futuristic prediction, or kind of something that you just are extremely fascinated about that you think will help mankind in terms of monetizing your data?
I won't go to the mankind aspect, but I will go down to like something very tangible. And I think that all of the protocols that are being built now, whether it's Ruby, Kylan, Ocean, and a whole bunch of other ones, what we're going to be able to do is build in incentives so that people start unlocking their data, that they start get interested in this, whether it's prizes and challenges, data farming, or other types of incentives where people can stake on different assets and earn money from it. And that kind of gets to the core where we make it inclusive. So yes, maybe that does help the world, but the most tangible thing in the next, let's say 3 to 6 months, is if our data economy ecosystem of projects finds ways to put the incentives, usually our own crypto tokens, to work, so that we suck in more community, like the NFT world, like the DeFi world, like the ICO world did.
Amazingly put. Our brothers from Kylan, you guys have any remarks on that?
I can't add. That was an amazing answer. I can't add too much to that.
Yeah, totally agree. That's the exact right sort of like near-term, high-value niche use case situation that we need to develop, and that will be a magnet toward wider adoption as time goes on.
Fantastic. And Tyler, what about you? Any like future developments, like or comments on the incentive economy, or things that you're really looking forward to in terms of data monetization?
I think that Bruce put it really well, and I would hate to follow that up, I guess, as an ending note. But I will just say that you know, I think I can speak for everyone in this room in saying that we're excited to just be building for, you know, it kind of sounds cliche, but a better future, right? You know, just in terms of you know, from maybe it'll start small, but at the same time, if you can just think of the concept of owning your data and then being able to do whatever you want with it, share it, not share it, you know, just kind of taking more control, in my opinion, that's, you know, it's a very noble cause, and we're excited to be, you know, working towards it. So.
Yeah, I think the dopamine hit you're going to get from, you know, value, crypto value, real value, whatever you want to call it, value in your wallet is going to be a higher dopamine hit than, you know, scrolling through a TikTok and having these centralized sources sort of like mediate that experience.
Amazing, guys. Well, it was a great panel. We had an absolute blast getting to know more about a topic that is really just starting to mature nowadays, despite the fact that Bruce and his team at Ocean Protocol has been working on this for a very long time. Good visionaries. It's great to see you guys all aligned. And I hope everyone out there enjoyed watching today's panel. Please enjoy the rest of the show and have a blast at BlockDown Conference DeData.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.